It's Mejia May.
Drum loops are always a great starting point, but to build a unique sound, you'll have to layer your drums. It doesn't have to be difficult. All it takes is two things: drum selection and EQing. It's your boy Mejia Made, and this is how you level up your sound. Okay guys, so let's go ahead and get started. We're gonna first start off by listening to the drum loop that I started with, which is just a 1-bar loop. This is what it sounds like. So when I first came across this drum loop, there were a couple things that stood out to me. I really like the drums, the kick, snare, but something that I found really interesting about this drum loop is the bongos. So I knew that this drum loop was a great starting point. The only thing is though, is that I still felt that the kick and snare were falling a little bit too flat. I knew that in order to beef them up, rather than rely on mixing to do so, I would just be better off layering my own drum sounds on top of the drum loop, which leads me into the first topic, which is drum selection. In order to layer drums properly, it's really important that anything else you add on top of a drum loop is sonically similar. That way you don't have to rely too much on EQing, compressing, or messing around with any other type of mixing tool. If your drum selection is on point from the start, it makes your job a whole lot easier. So with that being said, we're gonna first start off with the snare that I decided to layer. I felt that this snare worked because sonically it was similar to the snare within the drum loop. There was already some bottom end and not too much top end, which meant that mixing wise, I really didn't have to do anything to the snare. The next thing I added was a snare roll. The reason I decided to go with this snare roll is because in order to turn this 1-bar loop into an 8-bar drum loop, I had to add these other type of elements that wasn't found originally in the drum loop in order to make the drum loop a lot more interesting and to not bore the listener. This is what it sounds like. And now to really add that thump to the drum loop, I decided to add this kick. With the kick as well, it was really important that I chose an old school sounding kick as opposed to something more modern, because a lot of the more modern kicks tend to have more of that high-end puffy sound. We have a couple more elements to go through as far as drum selection is concerned, but we have the most important elements out the way. Let's quickly listen to the drum loop along with those 3 additional elements. My job has been made a lot easier because I took a little bit of extra time to properly choose the right drum sounds. Let's go ahead and finish off with the remainder of the elements that I added as layers, and then we'll move on to the importance of EQing. I decided to add another type of snare, which hits a different pocket from the snare within the drum loop. This is what it sounds like. So now with that out the way, we're down to our last 2 elements, the first of which is this crash. One key thing about drum selection is that you want to add sounds that serve a purpose. One of the biggest mistakes I was making when I first started to layer my drum sounds is that I was adding too many unnecessary sounds. And that's one of the worst things you can do. You begin to over clutter your beat, in this case, the drum loop, and mixing wise, it just becomes a headache. And now for the final layer, which is this percussive sound. This percussive element only plays at the next set of the 4 bars. So now, before we quickly dive into EQing, let's take a listen to the drum loop along with every layered element. So now we've gone through the most important part of drum layering, which is drum selection. Let's now move on to the second component of drum layering, which is EQing. For the drum loop, the only thing I did is deduct everything under 90 hertz. You guys can see why drum selection is so important. By choosing the right drum sounds, it made EQing so much easier. By just putting an EQ on the original drum loop, and a very basic EQ at that, it saved me a lot of time. So now with just those 2 things, I was able to turn a 1-bar drum loop into an 8-bar drum loop. I brought a new life into that original drum loop sample. And now you guys have the right mentality to be able to apply it yourself. And that's how you level up your sound. You should now be able to turn basic drum loops into something more unique and crafted. Since we're on the topic of drums, click on the link above to see how you can make your sample chop stand out by keeping your drums simple. With that being said, if you gained any type of insight from this video, please leave a like, please leave a comment. It's really gonna help the channel grow. I'm gonna catch you guys next week for a new video. Until then, stay blessed.